Smash that subscribe button or don't. But if you stay, you're stepping into a case that should have stayed buried. The file was stamped closed in 1994. Detective Laura Hensley still remembered the smell of that storage room: dust, old paper, forgotten lives boxed and labeled. She wasn't supposed to be there. Cold cases weren't her assignment. But something about the name kept pulling at her. Ethan Cole, 27 years old, found dead in his apartment in Portland, Oregon. No signs of forced entry. No witnesses. No clear motive. Just silence. Back then, investigators called it a robbery gone wrong. His wallet was missing, drawers overturned, the place staged to look chaotic. But Laura noticed something others had ignored. Ethan's watch was still on his wrist. Expensive. Untouched. A thief doesn't leave behind what's easiest to take. That was the first crack in the story. The second came from a sealed evidence bag buried deep in the box. A single item, a glass tumbler recovered from the kitchen sink. It had been processed for prints in 1994, but the technology back then wasn't what it is now. The report simply read, partial, no match. Laura held the bag up to the light. Someone had washed that glass. But not well enough. Run it, she told the lab tech. He hesitated. It's almost 30 years old. Run it anyway. Days later, the results came back. Not a fingerprint match, but something better. A partial DNA profile. Weak, degraded, but usable. That's when everything changed. Instead of running it through traditional databases, Laura pushed for something controversial: genetic genealogy. It wasn't standard procedure. It was expensive, time-consuming, and filled with legal gray areas. But it had cracked cases before. Cases that were colder than this one. Weeks turned into months. A family tree began to form, branches stretching across states, generations, hidden connections. Names surfaced. Dead ends followed. Then finally a match. Not direct. Not obvious. But close enough to point in one direction. A man named Daniel Reeves. No criminal record. No history of violence. A respected high school teacher who had been living quietly in Idaho for over 2 decades. Too clean. Laura dug deeper. Cross-referencing timelines, locations, old records. And then she saw it. In 1994, Daniel Reeves had been living less than 2 blocks from Ethan Cole. Neighbors. Close enough to know routines. Close enough to watch. Still, proximity wasn't proof. She needed something stronger. That's when a retired officer from the original investigation returned her call. His voice was older now, slower, but sharp. There was something we never logged, he admitted. Didn't think it mattered back then. Laura's grip tightened on the phone. What was it? A witness. A woman across the street. Said she saw someone leaving Ethan's apartment that night, carrying something wrapped in cloth. Laura's pulse quickened. Did she describe him? The pause. Yeah, he said quietly. But that's not the part we missed. Laura leaned forward. What did you miss? Another pause. Longer this time. We never asked what was inside the cloth. And when Laura reopened the evidence inventory list, she realized something was gone. The missing item wasn't listed anywhere in the official report. Detective Laura Hensley stared at the evidence inventory again, her eyes scanning every line like she might force the truth to appear. Wallet, missing. Jewelry, intact. Electronics, untouched. Kitchenware, logged, except for one glaring inconsistency. There were supposed to be 6 glass tumblers in Ethan Cole's apartment. Only 5 had been recovered. At first glance, it felt insignificant. The clerical error, maybe. But Laura had learned something about old cases. What gets overlooked is usually what matters most. She tracked down the retired officer again, pushing harder this time. You said the witness saw someone leaving with something wrapped in cloth. Did she mention the size? Small, he replied. About the size of, I don't know, maybe a glass. Or a jar. Laura felt it click into place. Someone hadn't just taken something. They had taken something specific. And now, decades later, one glass had resurfaced in evidence, while another had vanished completely. Why take one and leave the rest? Her partner, Detective Marcus Vale, asked. Because one of them mattered, Laura said. And the other one was a mistake. They pulled Ethan's case photos back up. The kitchen sink. The counter. The drying rack. Laura zoomed in until the image pixelated. 5 glasses. But one spot on the rack was empty, perfectly clean, like something had been removed recently before the crime scene was processed. Whoever staged the robbery missed that, Marcus muttered. No, Laura corrected. They fixed it. They came back and took it. That meant one thing. The killer had returned to the scene after the initial investigation. Which meant this wasn't panic. This was control. Laura's focus shifted back to Daniel Reeves. She dug into his past with new urgency, peeling back layers that had gone unquestioned for decades. On the surface, he was untouchable, Teacher of the Year awards, community programs, spotless reputation. But buried deeper, cracks began to show. A transfer request in late 1994, filed just weeks after Ethan's death. No explanation given. Just a sudden move out of Oregon. Then something darker. A disciplinary note from the school he worked at before relocating. It was vague, heavily redacted. But one line stood out. Unprofessional conduct involving a colleague. Resolved internally. Laura tracked down the colleague. It took days, multiple calls, and finally a reluctant agreement to speak. The woman's voice trembled as she recounted something she had never officially reported. He had a temper, she said. Not loud, not obvious. But it was there. Controlled. Like he was always holding something back. Did he ever mention Ethan Cole? Laura asked. Silence. Then, yes. Laura's heart skipped. He said Ethan owed him. That's the exact phrase. I didn't understand it at the time. Owed him. That wasn't random. That wasn't robbery. That was personal. Laura and Marcus moved fast, preparing a warrant to collect a direct DNA sample from Daniel Reeves. After all these years, they were close, closer than anyone had ever been. But as they coordinated with Idaho authorities, something went wrong. Daniel Reeves didn't show up for work. At first, it seemed like nothing. A sick day. A delay. But when officers arrived at his home, the front door was unlocked. Inside, everything looked normal, almost too normal. No signs of struggle. No obvious rush. Except for one thing. His computer was gone. And on the kitchen counter, sat a single, spotless glass. Waiting. Laura stepped closer, her pulse pounding. Don't touch it, Marcus warned. But she didn't need to. Because even from a distance, she could see it. A faint, partial fingerprint, deliberately left behind. And underneath the glass, a folded note. Laura carefully opened it. 3 words stared back at her. You're too late. Laura didn't speak. She just stared at the note, the words sinking in like a slow poison. You're too late. Marcus broke the silence. He knew. Not just knew, Laura said quietly. He planned for this. The room suddenly felt staged, again. Just like Ethan Cole's apartment all those years ago. Too clean. Too deliberate. Every object placed with intention. Except this time, Daniel Reeves wasn't covering up a crime. He was sending a message. A statewide alert went out within the hour. Roads monitored. Airports flagged. Every known associate contacted. But as hours stretched into a full day, one truth became harder to ignore. Daniel Reeves had vanished without a trace. And worse, he had a head start. Laura refused to let the trail go cold again. She went back to the beginning, retracing every step of Ethan's final days. Phone records. Old emails. Financial transactions. Things that had been meaningless in 1994 now painted a clearer picture. Ethan Cole hadn't just known Daniel Reeves. He had been involved with him. A series of recovered emails, pulled from an old archived server, revealed a hidden relationship between the two. Not friendship. Not business. Leverage. Ethan had discovered something about Daniel. Something damaging enough to hold over him. The emails were fragmented, but one line stood out. If you don't fix this, I will. Laura leaned back, piecing it together. This wasn't just murder, she said. It was desperation. Marcus nodded. Ethan pushed him. And Daniel snapped. But something still didn't fit. If Daniel had killed Ethan to silence him, why stay quiet for decades? Why not run then? Us. He thought he got away with it, Laura realized. Until now. That's when the lab called. The glass from Daniel's kitchen had been processed. It was a match. Direct, undeniable DNA linking him to the partial profile from Ethan's apartment. After nearly 30 years, they finally had their killer. But they still didn't have him. 2 days later, a call came in from a small town just outside Boise. A motel clerk reported a man who had checked in under a false name, paid cash, and hadn't left his room in over 24 hours. Laura and Marcus were already on a flight before the report finished processing. By the time they arrived, local police had secured the scene. Room 17. The door was locked from the inside. Laura felt it again, that same tension, that same sense of stepping into something already decided. "Ready?" Marcus asked. She nodded. The door was forced open. The smell hit first, stale air, something metallic underneath. Daniel Reeves was inside. Sitting on the edge of the bed. A glass rested in his hand. Empty. An overturned bottle lay on the floor beside him. Laura approached slowly, her eyes scanning the room. No struggle. No signs of panic. Just control. Even in the end. He chose this, Marcus said under his breath. But Laura wasn't looking at Daniel anymore. She was looking at the wall. Photos. Dozens of them. Ethan Cole, printed from old archives. News clippings. Case summaries. Even recent surveillance images of Laura herself. Her stomach tightened. "He's been watching," she whispered. "For years. Maybe decades." On the nightstand, there was one final note. Laura unfolded it carefully, her hands steady despite everything. "I didn't make a mistake," it read. "You did. You reminded me." Her breath caught. This wasn't closure. This was continuation. Daniel hadn't run because he was afraid of being caught. He ran because being found again made him feel alive. Laura stepped back, the weight of it settling in. They had solved the case. They had named the killer. But the truth was far worse than anyone had imagined. This wasn't a man who slipped through the cracks. This was a man who had been waiting inside them. And as the room fell silent, one thought refused to let go. How many others had almost been forgotten, just like Ethan? If you think the story was intense, you're not ready for the next one. Hit subscribe so you don't miss it.